A few weeks back, there was a git tag made for Fish 4.0 B1. Fish's core code ported from C++ to Rust. Yes, the rewrite everything in Rust meme is still alive and well. Now, for anyone who doesn't know what Fish is, it's a popular alternative to shells like Bash and ZSH. It should never, ever, ever be used as your main system shell. Its syntax is vastly different from a normal Unix shell. But as something you interact with directly, honestly, a lot of people swear by it and now refuse to use anything else. And this rewrite in Rust, this is not a joke. This is not like, haha, funny, what if we did that? No, it's actually done. They've actually rewritten the code base from C++ into Rust. Now, other languages are still in use in the project, but the core language is Rust. And that's going to be the language going forward. Now, to follow up this release, there was a blog post also created a couple of days ago, Fish 4.0, the Fish of Theseus. All of this began when the current main maintainer of the project, Ridiculous Fish, opened up this pull request on January 29th, 2023. Rewrite it in Rust. And yes, the title was intended to be a joke. It's a play on the rewrite it in Rust meme. Haha, funny. Yes, the author knows that, but when this was first made, it got shared around on places like Reddit, Hacker News, and a lot of people didn't really understand what was going on here. They thought this was some random developer coming along who was like, I'm gonna try to rewrite it in Rust. Why, we don't like C++ here, we're gonna do Rust now. And obviously most people were like on board, hey, we know who this person is. But there were people who came from other places who were like, yeah, let's just like start a fight about Rust and bring our Reddit and Hacker News comments over from the place they should have been, the Hacker News and Reddit threads, and have that discussion in the pull request thread. Please stop doing that. If you want to rant about something, like in my comment section, in a Reddit thread, in a Hacker News thread, there's some developers who get annoyed about, like, oh, why are people being toxic in those threads? But keep it to those threads. Don't go to the places where the developers are doing work. Now, whilst rewrite it in Rust is haha funny meme, this is not the first time a rewrite has actually been done. Fish is a fairly old codebase, or at least older than most people assume. It was started in 2005 by Axel Liljenkrantz. I probably completely butchered that, who left the project sometime in 2009. The original code was in C, and he decided to use wchrt, presumably because that is how one assumed Unicode would work in 2005. After a few years of inactivity, Fish was picked back up by Peter, who goes by Ridiculous Fish. The name, I understand, is a complete coincidence. It's a pretty good coincidence. He wrote a fork called Fish and got Axel's okay to make it the official Fish later on. This became Fish 2.0. Ridiculous Fish then ported Fish to C++, initially mainly to get some data structures to replace the typical C write your own craft. We did later use more C++ features, especially after C++ 11. Now let's go back to the blog post we started with. Truth be told, we did not quite expect that to be as popular as it was. It was written as a bit of an in-joke for the Fish developers first, and not really as a press release to be shared far and wide. We didn't post it anywhere, but other people did, and we got a lot of reactions. Now, this is going to be my advice to basically everybody out there, whether you're a developer, a content creator, or anybody else. If you are not ready for something to be talked about publicly, for something to be commented on, do not share it publicly. You might say, oh, people should keep their opinions to themselves, but that's not how the real world works. You're on the internet, you're in the public square, people are going to talk about things, whether they should be doing so in that forum or not. Now that we've released the beta of Fish 4.0 containing 0% C++ and almost 100% pure Rust, let's take a look back at what we've learned, what went well, and what could have gone better, and what we can do now. So the biggest question is why bother with all this work? It's not like C++ is an abandoned language where the compilers have giant security issues, the core library is just non-functional, so what's the point of going from a perfectly good language to arguably another perfectly good language? Some might say it's better, but let's just say 2 good languages. Well, we've experienced some pain with C++. In short, tools and compiler/platform differences, ergonomics and thread safety, and community. Now here we start annoying the C++ fans. Frankly, the tooling around the language isn't good, and we had to take on some additional pain in order to support our users. We want to provide up-to-date fish packages for systems that aren't up to date. Now, of course, yes, you can do this with static linking, but that's a pain. Like LTS Linux and older macOS. I don't know what LTS Linux is supposed to mean. I guess like Ubuntu LTS? Because LTS Linux is not like a thing that exists. I guess they mean the kernel? I don't know. They mean something there. But there is no rust up for C++, no standard way to install recent C++ compilers on these operating systems. This means adopting recent C++ standards would complicate the lives of packages and would-be contributors. And of course, the other way you can get around this is containerizing the application as well, but again, that's kind of a hassle, and it's much easier to use a language where there's a system built in to, allow for more modern versions to be used. Here's a dirty secret. While external commands run in parallel, Fish's execution of internal commands, built-ins, and functions is currently serial and can't be backgrounded. Lifting this limitation will enable features like asynchronous prompts or non-blocking completions, as well as performance gains. Now, I would argue this unto itself is a performance gain, but I guess other performance gains as well. Now, like POSIX shells, this could be achieved by creating subshells. So basically, you're in the shell, you make a shell process off of the shell, and you run that as like a separate process, and that is effectively going to allow you to run it asynchronously from the main thing. But this is a very leaky approach. Passing around environment variables can be a bit weird, so it's not exactly a good approach. We prototyped true multi-threaded execution in C++, but it just didn't work out. For example, it was too easy to accidentally share objects across threads with only post-hoc tools like Thread Sanitizer to prevent it. Now, you could 100% say, that's a skill issue. And yes, you would be correct. However, not everything has to be a competition. Not everything has to be some like ego check. Sometimes you can just use better tools that deal with a problem for you. The ergonomics of C++ are also simply not good. Header files are annoying, templates are complicated, you could easily cause a compile error that throws pages of overloads in the standard library at you. Many functions are unsafe to use, C++ string handling is very verbose with easily confusable overloads of many methods, making it attractive to drop down to C-style character pointers, which are quite unsafe. There are many reasons why they're unsafe, one of them being that there's no internal mechanism to stop you just overflowing a C string, so you can just do that. It's just like part of the language. One good case study of the deficiencies of C++ in practice is a C library, Cursors. This is a venerable library to access terminal features, and we use it to access the term info database, which describes differences in terminal features and behavior. This not only caused us grief by being unsafe to use in weird ways, the current term pointer, or sometimes macro, can be null, and is dereferenced in surprising places. So basically, you have to make sure you are checking it for null every single time you try to use it, but also caused a surprisingly high number of issues when building from source. This was either because there are a number of implementations of it with differences as useless as this function takes a character on system X, but an int on system Y. So differing implementations based on different systems. So again, you have to make sure you are checking your types every single time you try to use them, but also because users kept coming to us with new and excitingly terrible ways to package and install it. The dependency system is the system package manager, and you have to trust that every single distro out there is doing things in a way that make sense. If one of them decides, hey, we're just going to package things in a way that doesn't make any sense, and that happens to be Debian, Good luck, enjoy, have fun with things being weird. And without a doubt, you've heard this one before. Subjectively, C++ isn't drawing in the crowds. People just don't really care about C++. Yes, there are lots of C++ developers, but who is excited about C++? Who says, I want to learn C++? There's somebody, but usually it's, I want to learn this language to do this thing. Whereas there are people out there who are like, I really like Go. I really like Rust. I am evangelizing Zig. Where's the C++ evangelist? I'm sure there's somebody, but there's just not that many of them, and over the years, they just haven't really had that many contributors because of it. I do know one person, though, who would love to work on a C++ codebase in their free time. Only one of them. Nothing more. But the question still remains, why Rust? It is not the only language that has ways to manage new versions of the language. It is not the only language that people are excited about and people actually want to write. There are other choices out there. Well, the very first thing, Rust is cool. It's fun. You might say, oh, that doesn't really matter as a reason, but it actually is very important. It's tempting to try and sweep this under the rug because it feels gauche to say, but it's actually important for a number of reasons. For one, Fish is a hobby project, and that means we want it to be fun for us. Nobody's being paid to work on Fish. We need it to be fun. Being fun and interesting also attracts contributors. That is for the non-technical reason, but there are technical reasons as well. Rust also has great tooling. The tools have really paid a lot of attention to use, and the compiler errors are terrific. Not even compared to C++, they actually just rule. And RustUp is magic, and allows people to get started quickly with minimal fuss or root permissions. When the answer to how to upgrade C++ compiler is find a repository with root permissions, compile it yourself, install some other repository or a Docker image, it is amazing how the Rust answer can just be use RustUp. Honestly, as hard as it'll get with Rust is like, maybe in one case you need to use the nightly build, and that's pretty much it. Rust has great ergonomics. The difference between C++ pointers, which can always be null, and Rust options are apparent very quickly, even to those of us who had never used it before. So options are basically a way to have an optional value in Rust. Rather than being a null if nothing is set, it is a none. Now, this gives you a lot more guarantee when it comes to dealing with that value. Having an explicit use system where you know exactly which function comes from which module is a great improvement over includes. Rust makes it easy to add dependencies. Now, some people who are not, very experienced developers are going to say, oh, dependency hell, all of that stuff. You don't want to add a bunch of dependencies. You want to add dependencies in cases where someone's going to write the code better than you. You don't want to have the whole web situation where you have a million dependencies for doing basic things you should just write yourself, but in many cases, it does make sense. We don't want to go overboard with it, but we do want to change our history format from our homegrown, I can't believe it's not YAML, to something specified that other tools can actually read, and Rust makes it easy to add support for YAML, JSON, KDL. I had never heard of this format before, but the killer feature of Rust from Fishshell's perspective is send and sync, statically enforcing rules about threading. Fearless concurrency is strong. You can still blow your leg off with fork or signal handlers, but send and sync will be the key to unlocking fully multi-threaded execution with confidence in its correctness. Again, you could argue that the threading thing is a skill issue, but just use better tooling. Just don't think about the problem. Just use tooling where it just works nicely. Now, of course, every time you do a port, every time you change language, you're gonna run into some issues because languages are different and not everything is going to be better. Chief among them is how Rust handles portability. While it offers many abstractions over systems, allowing you to target a variety of systems with the same code, when it comes to adapting your code to systems at a lower level, it's all based on new running systems by hand, using checks like Target OS, FreeBSD, NetBSD, OpenBSD, so on and so forth. This is a imperfect solution and an annoying solution. If FreeBSD12 gains a function that we want to use, libc would add it, but calling it would then fail on FreeBSD11 without a good way to check at the moment. Most of this would be solved if Rust had some form of saying, compile this if that function exists, which just makes sense. We were confused by a deprecation warning in the libc crate, which explains that time t will be switched to 64-bit on muscle in the future. We tried to work around it. Turns out, it wasn't actually a problem that affected them, because it only became a problem if they passed that value from one C library to another. But most importantly for them, they could not remove CMake. That's because while Cargo is great at building things, it is very simplistic at installing them. Cargo wants everything in a few neat binaries, and that isn't our case. Fish has about 1,200 .fish scripts, 961 completions, 217 associated functions, as well as about 130 pages of documentation as HTML and man pages, and the web config tool and the man page generator, both written in Python. It also has a test suite that is light on unit tests but heavy on end-to-end script and interactive test. The script tests run through our own little check tool, which runs a script and compares its output to embedded comments. The interactive tests are driven by PEXPECT, which fakes terminal interaction and checks that the right thing happens when you press buttons. We kept CMake in a simplified form for these tasks, but let it hand over the responsibility of building to Cargo. This is a problem I've heard from a lot of projects out there. Everything about the Rust ecosystem is great. Rust up is great, the language is great, but Cargo is seriously lacking. And it might be fine if we're talking about, like, small projects, but when you have a very complex project like Fish, this is something that many people seem to complain about. Also, Cygwin is being lost as a supported platform. I didn't even know they supported Cygwin. Cygwin is a way to use a Unix shell over on the Windows side, which was quite common before Windows subsystem for Linux came along. I'm sure some people still use Cygwin, but I would imagine it's a lot less popular than it is today. Now, there is a bunch of other stuff in this blog post that I didn't even remotely get to, which I would highly recommend checking out as well. Feel free to read the blog. It's linked in the description down below. I know this whole idea of, like, rewrite everything in Rust is kind of funny meme, but you know what? If devs actually want to do it, if devs feel like that is a better way to run the project, more power to you. Like, I'm not going to tell you not to do it. I'm not going to tell you to do it. If that is what you feel like is the best thing to do with your project, go right ahead. But what do you think? Are you a Fish user? Do you care about rewrite it in Rust? Are you a Rust developer yourself and want everything rewritten in Rust? I would love to know. So if you like the video, go like the video. I don't know what this bit of hair is doing here. It's gonna be doing that all day, I guess. If you really like the video and you want to become one of these amazing people over here, check out the Patreon, subscribes, and LiberaPay linked in the description down below. That's gonna be it for me, and I'll write this video on Rust.